I just don't know how to break a conversation with that.
Yeah.
And I miss her and I love her and about to graduate from here, and it feels very strange, but I'm very grateful for it too.
Beautiful. Okay, well, let's get that up here for your mom.
Great. Oh, her name was Eurydice. Or what did he say?
Eurydice.
Eurydice de la Candelaria en la cárcel.
Eurydice.
Sí.
You can first say everything. Eurydice. So we have Eurydice still. Mary. Bueno. Right? You gotta do that.
So, this is a swatch watch. Amma didn't wear it, but, she inspires me to, share this with you. She always wore swatch watches. She was, quite a fashionista. And, my parents, my grandparents, ancestors, I'm so thankful, Amma especially, guided me. Daddy was there. Daddy left the planet in 1999. Amma was there through my dissertation and throughout my practice as a scholar and as an academic through all of the difficulties and all the exclusions. And she, her unwavering faith and determination that I carried with me, and I shared this in our altar today.
That's beautiful. What's her name?
Amma's name is Indramadi.
Indra.
Indra.
Madi. Indra. Indra. Lima? So, the purpose of the altar and to start in this way is to acknowledge that we're here because people lived before us. Would not be here without them. And so it's important to note that connection for the ones that we can name and the ones that we can't name, right? So what I'm going to do just a libation. And if you wouldn't mind, if you can, stand up. Pretty good. Stretch out a little bit. And like our heartbeat, right? First beat, we hear with our mother's heart. We're in her womb. If you wouldn't mind coming a little closer, don't mind. Now, you come to the table, just so you can. No, it's able to see if you just want to spread out so everybody can. Listen to the sound. So, the spirit of lavender collective, we have a lavender collective. As I call the names of people we love to pass on. Maybe you didn't bring anything today, maybe you didn't think about it, maybe the spirit didn't hit you until now. But if you want to say that another loved one, it's okay if the names kind of fall on top of each other. The ancestors know what we're talking about. They'll hear it themselves if you call them. Bom dia, Dumele ete sendiria che sabona. Greet you in the languages. You may not have known what I've said, but trust me, our beloved ancestors know the call. Water is used to pour the libation, or you can use wine, You can use liquor. Water nourishes, it cleanses. So we're gonna pour into the cans. Harriet Tubman. Audre Lorde.
Marcus Garvey.
Marcus Garvey. Phil. Antonio. Cecilia. Euredini. Did I say that right?
What did he say?
Say it again.
What did he say?
Eurydice. Eurydice. Indramadi. Indramadi.
Karen Covington. Sadasivam Sangasivam.
Mabel Alexander.
Ramalingam Kandeya.
Marcus Garvey.
Kanaham Kande.
Olivia Otto.
Soranil
Venkos
Kirsten.
Viejo.
Bell Hooks.
Audre Lorde.
Toni Morrison.
Shay.
Virginia Walker.
Ashay.
Raphael Lattimore.
Senior and Ethel.
Michaela Williams. Shay.
William S.
Charlotte Lee. Coretta Scott King.
Tashikwa Jones.
James Baldwin.
Jean Chu.
Langston Hughes.
Margaret Burroughs.
Phyllis Wheatley.
Zora Neale Hurston.
Harriet Tubman.
Mary Chu.
Sandra Bland.
Ida B. Wells. Jesse Jackson.
You can get on Ida and Jesse Jackson. I'd say, yes, God. Ashay. And beloveds, I just want to say to you, for those of you who put items on the altar, before you leave the room, if you're put the items. Okay.
All right, thank you all for your patience and grace as we try to figure this out. As we can probably imagine, this is our first time doing this, so we all CP time, and that's okay. That's okay. So I would like to introduce our panels. I am not on just yet, but did everybody receive a program? Okay, I will admit to our faults. Open in front. We actually have a misprint in the brochure versus the flyer, but the paper is correct. So the paper is the one that is correct. My apologies for the oversight. We tried our best. So we have, actually, let me pull up my copy. We are running a little behind, about 15 minutes. However, our first panel is on white institutions and survival. Now, this panel was made because of the submissions that we received. We did not create the panels ahead of time. We let the people tell us what they wanted to write about, what they wanted to discuss, and we created something around those ideas. So White Institutions and Survival will have Lex Green from the University of Massachusetts. We have Samrat Sharma from Penn State University, and Drs. Christy A. Ford from Mount Holyoke College and Dr. Jalisha Jolly from Amherst College. I will give our overview, read our bios, and introduce our guests. If you would like to come up and get set up, I can do that while I'm reading for you. So you have your own computer. Okay. It's also on mine. Do you have one? Thank you. Okay, great. So you can open your thing and I will, and since I'm behind, go ahead and get set up. Okay. Okay. Celeste Green is a mixed race Black woman from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and first year PhD student in the Social Justice Education, SJE, PhD program at UMass Amherst. Lex centers pedagogical inquisition in Black feminist research projects, which help Black assigned female at birth, AFAB, people narrate stories about navigating the US higher education institutions, HEIs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm myself, so. All right, so I always usually begin by taking a centering breath for myself because I always need that. So if you'd like to join me in that, I invite you to. Usually I place my hands over my chest like this, and I just take one deep breath. Thank you. So the title of this presentation is Mapping Home Within Ourselves, Black Homemaking for Black Doctoral Students. As you'll see throughout the presentation, the title of my actual project ebbed and flowed, similar to what Cara was describing in the region of the title. But the part of the title that stays the same is the concept of Black home. So I guess first and foremost, I want to start out with a little bit of a personality statement. As you already heard, I am a mixed race Black woman from Bridgeport, Connecticut, but most of my family lives in the Bronx, New York, for my maternal lineage. And as you can see in the middle, that is a snapshot of our family dynamics with my cousins, my aunts, and my grandma who recently passed in 2024. I really pride being from Bridgeport because of its stereotypes that precede it oftentimes, and because it is often typecast as an inner city full of a lot of gang violence and criminal activity. But for me, I'm very proud of the fact that I got a public education at one of the best magnet schools and was able to stay there from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. But when I first entered higher education institutions, I quickly realized I didn't really have the social capital I needed to navigate those institutions successfully. So my story is full of a lot of non-linear qualities and a lot of adversity as I figured out, how do I make home in this place that is unfamiliar? And how do I set a legacy in place for myself and others to follow? So my study over time, it became Watering the Ancestral Garden, Black Homemaking for Current Black Doctoral Students. And the evolution of this title really came out of my project goals, which were centered in a pilot qualitative research study, which centered the experiences of Black doctoral students and primarily assigned female at birth people. I say assigned female at birth because I want to honor and respect people of the gender diaspora and not primarily focused on women, but more so people socialized as women like myself. I identify as both a woman and non-binary, and it's always important for me to note that there are slight differences in what I claim in both of those terms and things that might not overlap between those two experiences. So I wanted to see, as current doctoral students in the academy, how we navigate those ambiguities and the ways that we find home in places that can often be hostile and displacing for us. I also grounded this study in a mix of Black placemaking theory, and I really wanted to, instead of making a place for a site for our stories, really create poem within our stories and within each other, which was what ended up happening. As we get into the methodology, you'll hear me talk about Gabnerian philosophy a little bit and the idea of the fusion of horizons. It's basically this ideal place you want to reach in your research where you kind of fuse with your participants and your stories become one. That was a little bit what started to happen between us. And we realized that we were finding home in just healing ourselves through the stories we were telling about navigating the academy. For my formal research questions, I was really curious to know how current Black women and assigned female at birth people understand their doctoral experiences. Next, I was interested in how people create homes using their intersectional identities, both literal and figurative, inside of predominantly white institutions of higher education. And I really wanted to know how people then created homes outside of the institution in ways that kind of interacted with the home they were either feeling or not feeling within the institution. I'll overview my participant descriptions a little bit. I really love the way that both of my participants describe themselves, and I think it's always a little humorous whenever I read or look back at the ways in which they did so. So for my first participant, I refer to her as Nia Williams. An interesting part about this interview process as well was the timeline through which it all ebbed and flowed and came out. So with Nia, I interviewed her in interviews about 1 month apart. But for my second participant, Kessie, we did back-to-back interviews, hard and fast, just one weekend. And we were talking to each other for about 3 hours. And it was a very rich and quick process that I had a lot to pull from and process throughout the course of last semester. But for Nia, she described herself as Black, very Black, Southern person, Southern woman, blackity black, slickety black, and Afro-Indigenous. She identifies as AFAB. She is an HBCU alum, and she's in her early 20s, and is currently a fourth-year PhD student in philosophy. And for Kessie, she identifies as a Black woman from a working class background. And what I thought was really interesting and unique about the way she introduced herself was she said, "I'm African American by virtue of the world we live in." And she said a lot in her interview that basically she doesn't really care about labels, but by virtue of the world we live in, she has to contextualize and confine herself to these narrow set of labels oftentimes. She's also from Oakland, California, was newly 40 by the time we did our interview. It was like within that week, she had turned 40, and she's in her 6th year of her PhD studies in educational leadership. And both of these people, they both attend the same institution in New England, not trying to get sued, institution in New England. So this won't really come into play, but just for formality's sake, I created a couple of pseudonyms to refer to the institutions themselves we were discussing. So Jalandhar College is the HBCU in the South, where Nia Williams went for her undergrad. Caldwell University is essentially the university that they both attend, both Nia and Kessie. And then Wycliffe was another university in New England that only Kessie attended for her undergrad. For my methods, you'll see overachieving only child Black woman here. I took on a lot, I bit off a lot, and I'm still in the process of refining this. But as I said earlier, I was really humbled and enlightened by the fusion of horizons we were able to achieve between ourselves and the fact that our stories kind of became one after time. I was also from the start really interested in narrative inquiry. We all had different ways of leveraging AAVE as we were speaking. And we all had these really complex ways we asked each other rhetorical questions, and even in raising our eyebrows and kind of squinting our eyes, being like, really? Okay, I see you saying it this formal way, but I know there's a way of knowing that I could see there's a deeper meaning to what you were saying. And kind of throughout the whole interview process, I was like, how do I contextualize that? Like that grittiness, that messiness, that fluidity of knowing. How do I really confine that? And do I want to? I'm in an era of refusing research. So I really am not exactly concerned with capturing every single part of what happened, but it's a question that I have, and it's a grappling process that I am still contending with today, and I think I will contend with for the rest of my career. And then as far as paradigms are concerned, I was really more closely in the lane of constructivism, which is the idea that we construct and co-construct our realities together. And this mostly came into play when we were describing the difficulties of defining and constructing home due to various limiting and oppressive systems in higher education. And you'll see later when I talk a little bit more about my synthesis of themes, but I thought it was important to place two of the themes, which were disillusionment and displacement, underneath this constructivism, because as ironic as it might seem, we were kind of co-creating and co-constructing the ideas of disillusionment and displacement together as we found harmony, sympathy, and empathy within each other. And then another thing that was not formally in my findings or within my write-up of my report, but that was really essential to our overall process of meaning making was our engagement with arts-based methods. And I both had Kessie and Naya draw a depiction of what home will look like, which you'll see shortly. So for Naya's depiction of home, unfortunately, I had to blur the faces, but as you can see, it's very beautiful and very full. We talked a lot about her love of Chick-fil-A, collard greens, mac and cheese, and everything that you can find in the deep South Atlanta. And just to post-contextualize this artwork are everybody that's in this picture. If they came to visit me, it would instantly make my day. It would instantly, like, even the New England people, like if they were to come to my house, it's like the best day. And then I realized what simple things I do for myself to help myself feel more at home. And it's reflecting on all these things. And the pho that she could only very specifically get in Atlanta, made by the aunties in the Vietnamese church. She was very clear about that. And so then I pretty much asked about every individual element, but what really stuck out to me was the map bottom of the picture. And she said, yeah, so the map is a map of Metro Atlanta, which is basically Atlanta, but you know, people get particular. So I figured I would include the whole map of Metro Atlanta. I live on the south side, so I live in Clayton County. Fun fact, this is where Lotta was from. Another fun fact, she was my 7th grade Junior Theater Club induction speaker. This was a little bit before it got announced that she would be on Rap Game. So yeah, I'm very much south side centered. Once you get up here, it starts looking a little, you know, not Atlanta. Very not ethnic, if you catch. So Kessie, her artwork was very interesting in the sense that she offset it with this blue background. And we ended up speaking a lot about the calming effects of various colors and the grounding effects or the grounding processes that we have when we reflect about home. So to her core and her spirituality were very important, as well as her meditation practice. But then she immediately remarked that so many things came up for her in her artwork that she wasn't able to speak about in the interview the day before. And a big concept we talked a lot about was the idea of motherhood. So I'll just read the quote at the bottom of this slide, which says, "One thing that I didn't talk about is motherhood and what motherhood means to me as a person who doesn't biologically have children. But I have had a really interesting journey with motherhood, like since I was really young. So even when I was like a teenager, people, not just my peers, would always be like, you know, you remind me of my mother. You have like a mother energy. I mean, I was like really young and people were like, I can't wait until you become a mother one day." So then for a synthesis of themes, formally, these were my axial codes, for lack of a better word. There were 3 core themes, which were revision, return, displacement, and navigation. And then there are kind of loosely 5 sub-themes, which were transition, grief, learning, cultivation practices, and visibility, invisibility. And in the future, I really hope to narrow and refine these a little bit more and connect them to different praxis, theories, and paradigms. But essentially, I thought that it was really interesting how we navigated geographical, institutional, spiritual, and social confines. And then obviously you can see the interplay within the other themes as well. So for my future research directions, I'm currently trying to narrow out and work out the details of autoethnography and autotheoretical work, which is basically the fact that we are all theorists. There's something Bell Hooks says in Teaching to Transgress, where she mentions that she found a home within the theory. And I really believe in that as well. And I want to expand on that formally. I also want to comment on the non-existence of objective truth in Black feminism and qualitative research. And for me personally, I didn't formally mention this before, But within my multimedia artistry, I'm a makeup artist. I've been doing that since I was about 12 years old. But before that, I grew up going to dance recitals and wearing makeup from as young as 4 years old. So I'm really interested in the process of adultification and the ways it influences both our figurative and our literal academic performance, whether it's performance in the sense of perfectionism, respectability politics, and code switching, or actual test scores. Is there a way that we can qualify and perhaps quantify that? And then more broadly, I want to look into Black aesthetics and the concept of aesthetic labor, which is the fact that we basically are always doing work to upkeep how we show up in spaces, whether it's the physical and the more capitalist investment in ourselves or the emotional investment. Carrying people, being one of the only Black women in the room or the only Black woman in the room, what are the psychological and psychosocial impacts of that? Thank you so much. You can scan the QR code if you're interested in connecting with me further. I'm happy to answer any more questions that you may have. Kind of blacked out. I don't know where we're at with time, but hopefully I used it well. Okay. All right. I will.
Nah, y'all gotta do better than that.
Thank you so much for going first. I appreciate you. I know that that's not easy. So, our next presenter, someone said, "Yay, Lex," with a heart. Thank you, Lex. That was amazing. Another heart. Okay. So, you just give me 1 second to connect. Oh, there I am. I'm cute. Okay. Our next presenter is going to be a virtual presentation. Just give me 1 second to show your introduction. And as we are about 15 minutes behind schedule, everything's just going to be 15 minutes behind schedule. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. Okay. So, our next presenter is Samrat Sharma. This is not your updated bio. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to share it, but I have it that you emailed it to me because all work needs to be honored. Yeah, feel free to stretch, speak to your neighbor, say good morning, neighbor. And if you're on Zoom, say hey, everybody. Summer, give me just 1 second.
Cool.
And I will stop sharing so you can go ahead and put yours up if you would like. Okay. Excuse me. Oh, shoot, this thing's on. Order in the court. Thank you. Okay. So Samrat Sharma is a PhD candidate in women's gender and sexuality studies at Penn State, a South Asian queer scholar. His work explores trans studies, transnational feminism, and informal pedagogy. His dissertation examines how gossip and cussing shape the negotiation of identity within trans communities in India. He currently serves as the president of GWGSS at Penn State, was part of the Pride March organizing committee in Delhi, and is a certified commercial pilot in both the United States and India. He is a recipient of the Judith Hardy's Reproductive Justice Award and the Sarah Woods Outstanding Graduate Student and Teaching Awards. Please give a round of applause for Samrat Sharma.
Thank you. I just wanted to check if I'm audible and if everyone can see the slides.
Yes, we can see the slides, but we cannot see you. I will remove my spotlight 1 second.
Okay. How about now? Perfect. All right. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank for this opportunity to present my paper. And I want to start by saying that this is not part of my thesis project, but is part of the larger politics and activism that has come out of my experience with Black feminist frameworks, as well as teaching, working as a teaching assistant under Dr. Janine Staples Dixon, who's an amazing Black feminist scholar in education here at Penn State. And I kind of take their work on white supremacist patriarchal practices in predominantly white institutions and to see what kind of extraordinary pedagogies can come out of it. And within that, I started thinking about what does it mean to be a migrant in United States and how we kind of use Black feminist frameworks. And if there is a way we can challenge the way migrants use Black feminist frameworks to kind of form a larger community and support the Black Latinx and indigenous scholars here in United States of America. So the title of my presentation is Cheap Labor, Costly Silences, Black Feminism and Immigrant Accountability in the Academy. All right. So there was a moment in my graduate training where I began to take pride in the complexity of my identity. I could name it with increasing precision: migrant, queer, precarious, intersectional. Each seminar seemed to offer a sharper vocabulary through which to understand my position within the predominantly white institution. That precision felt like clarity. It was a form of intellectual and political grounding. But what I was learning, and I came to realize, is it is not accountability. It was a mode of narration. I was learning how to describe myself within structures of power, how to render my precarity legible, how to position my marginality as analytically sophisticated, how to draw on Black feminist thought to articulate my place within this institution. But I was not asking a different kind of question. What does it mean that my ability to speak, to circulate, to survive is made possible within the predominantly white institutions that continue to unevenly distribute recognition, stability, and intellectual authority? I begin this paper with this question. I argue that the uptake of Black feminist thought within contemporary predominantly white institutions requires a closer attention to the conditions under which it is mobilized. More specifically, when a migrant and a non-Black non-Black scholars rely on Black feminist frameworks primarily to narrate their own experiences of precarity, without examining how they are also positioned within institutional arrangements that marginalize Black intellectual labor, such engagements risk redirecting the critical form of Black feminism. This is not a claim about misuse in an individual sense, nor is it an argument against citation or intellectual engagement. Rather, it is a concern with how particular forms of engagement can become normalized under neoliberal conditions, where precarity is widespread and institutional survival increasingly depends on flexible and often underpaid labor. To make this argument, I move through three related concerns. First, the circulation of Black feminist thought as a conceptual resource. Second, the role of migrant graduate labor within institutional life. And third, the limits of intersectionality when it is reduced to a framework of self-description rather than a structural analysis. Jennifer Nash is particularly useful for thinking about contemporary circulation of Black feminist thought. She notes that Black feminism is often positioned simultaneously as something that requires protection and as something that functions as a corrective within the feminist interdisciplinary scholarship. This dual positioning reveals a very important tension. Black feminist thought is understood as vulnerable to appropriation, and yet it is expected to intervene, repair, and clarify the limitations of other frameworks. It is, in this sense, both guarded as well as mobilized at the same time. This tension especially becomes visible in the ways Black feminism circulates across the academy. The concepts such as intersectionality, relationality, structural critique have become widely available as intellectual resources. This availability reflects the force and the reach of the scholarship itself. At the same time, it raises questions about the conditions under which this circulation occurs. In my own experience, Black feminist frameworks have provided me with a crucial language and vocabulary for articulating my positionality as an immigrant scholar. For example, as I started this presentation, queer, migrant, South Asian, all of these have been made possible due to Black feminist frameworks. They have enabled me to make sense of precarity, marginalization, and institutional navigation in ways that feel both analytically rigorous and politically grounded. So let me just quickly name the precarity that we as scholars from the global South in United States have. One, our work depends on our visa. So anything we do that might harm our position, we can be thrown out of the country, and which apparently can be right now in these days, in these political movements, it can be literally anything. Second, we are required to fulfill a certain amount of credit hours. Third, we are required to work 20 hours in the university, but as we have noticed, we kind of land up working for about 30 hours a week, but we are paid for 20 and we are tied by that. Also, we cannot work outside the university. All of these kind of make precarity our position precarious, and this articulation was possible due to Black feminist framework. But this raises a question that is not always foregrounded. What does it mean to rely on Black feminist thought to narrate one's own position within the academy, while structural conditions shaping Black intellectual labor remains uneven? In this moment, engagement becomes displacement, where the force of Black feminist critique is redirected away from institutional structures and absorbed into a self-narration of precarity. This is not just a question about whether one should engage with Black feminism, but about what such engagement does in the first place. If Black feminism becomes a framework through which I narrate my marginality, its critical force might be redirected. And then it becomes less about a project of structural transformation and more about a resource for scholarly self-representation. And then let me talk about where is the privilege part coming in, which I have tended to ignore. One, I had the access to education in English, which made my position possible. I'm part of the very little population in India which had access to English education, which made my movement possible to the United States. Second, I was lucky to be born in an urban setup where my parents could send me to a school where the medium of education was English. Third, I could afford to get a visa. The visa process to move to this country is about $500, right? And that is not easy. So then let's see what work of diversity looks like. To understand how this redirection becomes normalized, it is important to consider the institutional context. Sarah Emmett's work on diversity provides an analysis into this. She asks the question, what does diversity do? And she suggests that diversity often functions less as a mechanism of transformation than as a way for institutions to reproduce themselves. She writes, to be seen as being diverse can be a way of not doing diversity itself. This distinction between appearance and transformation is particularly relevant under the conditions of austerity. As universities face budget cuts, hiring freezes, and restructuring, diversity does not disappear. Instead, it becomes more visible, more frequently invoked, and more central to how institutions narrate their own value. For example, if anyone wants to see any advertisements of US academia in places like India, Nepal, or Sri Lanka, you will always find South Asian faces, Black faces, the people from the Latinx and the indigenous community. And that kind of gives this idea that this university is more has a more inviting space for us. However, this visibility is sustained through labor. Graduate students, especially from the global South, play a significant role in maintaining the everyday function of this university. We teach courses, we support research, we contribute to departmental life, often under these conditions of precarity and dependency shaped by funding structures and visa regulations. In this sense, immigrant scholar labor is not external to institutional diversity, it is part of it. It shows how diversity is produced and sustained. It enables institutions to continue operating even if structural inequalities remain largely intact. This complicates how we understand positionality. It suggests that one can be both marginalized by the institution and integral to the continued functioning. This dual positioning becomes clear when we consider how narratives of marginality operates. Bell Hooks offers an important insight here. She writes, the image of Black as victims had an accepted place. It was the image of Black folks as equals that had no place. Her observation points to the ways in which certain forms of suffering becomes legible within the systems of power. Victimhood, in this sense, is not only a condition, it is also a mode of recognition. It allows institutions to acknowledge inequality without necessarily transforming the structures. For migrant scholars, narratives of precarity, victimhood, instability, exclusion, marginalization, these are both real and necessary, but they reflect only the lived conditions within the academy. At the same time, what these narratives are doing is they're being absorbed into the institutional frameworks, right? They are making it possible for them to be capable of accommodating, of absorbing certain forms of critique. Precarity becomes something that can be recognized, it can be discussed, it can be even managed without requiring deeper structural change. So the university would basically say, we sympathize with you or we empathize with you without doing anything to help us. This does not invalidate such narratives. I'm not saying that such narratives have no place. What it does suggest is that they may not, on their own, be sufficient for understanding how power operates. In this way, they may obscure the ways in which individuals who are themselves precarious can also be positioned within systems of power that distribute opportunities, recognition, and labor unevenly. This brings us to the question of implication, and Tuck and Yang's concept of moves to innocence becomes helpful over here. They describe these strategies that remove involvement in and culpability for the systems of domination. What is significant about this formulation is that it does not rely on intentionality. The moves to innocence does not necessarily emerge from a conscious desire to evade responsibility. Rather, they are embedded in ways individuals come to understand their own positions within structures of power. Narratives that foreground marginality without attending to the implication can function in this way. They make visible certain forms of harm while leaving other forms of participation unexamined. To recognize this is not to deny the reality of precarity, it is to acknowledge that precarity and implication can coexist. This shift in perspective requires returning to the question of intersectionality. Ashley Borer emphasizes that intersectionality is concerned not only with identity, but with the structural and institutional hierarchies and inequalities. Yet it is within these widespread use of academic contexts, intersectionality is often mobilized as a framework of self-description. It allows for increasingly nuanced accounts of positionality, of how individuals situated across multiple axes of identity can become recognizable. These accounts may seem important, but they can be limiting, right? And because they remain at the level of description itself. What tends to recede in such uses is a sustained engagement with structures, labor, institutional arrangements, the distributions of resources and recognition. For example, I'll give you a very interesting point. Our university, like at the Department of Education, they really pride on the fact that 70% of their graduate assistants are from Global South, right? They keep talking about it, how this is an amazing thing and everything. But one of the things that we realized pretty soon is that Penn State would not hire Black scholars or Latinx or indigenous scholars as professors. What they would do is, instead of paying that one professor $70,000, they would hire three graduate students from the South who make $20,000. So we are basically splitting the labor, and we are underpaid. And at the same time, we become complicit in the displacement of Black scholars within this university. So I then returned to the moment with which I began, the process of learning to name myself within the predominantly white institution. Immigrant, queer, precarious. These terms matter. They continue to describe real conditions I face. But my question now is that sufficient? because it does not, on its own accord, account for how my presence within the institution is also shaped by my participation in everyday functioning, through teaching, through research, through displacement. To recognize this is not to resolve the tension between marginality and implication. It is to remain within it. The importance is that we need to be uncomfortable in asking these questions. To conclude, this paper suggested that engagements with Black feminist thought within predominantly white institutions must attend to only to what such frameworks make visible, but it also to what they might obscure in the first place. When Black feminist concepts are mobilized primarily to articulate individual experiences of precarity, without responding to any analysis of institutional structures of labor, the critical force risks being redirected. It does not diminish the importance of Black feminist scholarship. On the contrary, underscores the need to engage with it with greater attention to its demands. Such engagement requires moving beyond description towards accountability. It requires us not only to ask how we are positioned within the system of power, but how we participate in its ongoing production. This is not a call to resolution. I would say that this is a different kind of orientation that is particularly targeted towards migrant labor that is coming into this country. One that pays attention to the tensions between marginality, labor, and institutional life. The question then is not how simply we understand our own precarity, but how we account for what our presence makes possible within the institution. Thank you. This is my email if anyone wants to reach out, and these are the works that I cited in my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Through 6 schools in the Northeast, racial advocacy work, performative injustice, and disrepair. So Dr. Ford is the director of Intergroup Dialogue Center at Mount Holyoke College, a professor of sociology and critical race and political economy. Her research explores the connections between race, gender, and intersecting social identities in relation to body management practices and justice-focused pedagogical approaches to teaching and learning. Dr. Jalicia Jolly is an assistant professor in Black Studies and American Studies at Amherst College and a visiting scholar at Princeton University's Efron Center for the Study of America. She is the founder of the Black Feminist Reproductive Justice, Equity, and HIV Activism Collective. Her first book, Erotics, bless you, Black Caribbean Woman and Self-Making in the Time of HIV/AIDS, is forthcoming with UC Press. Just a reminder, the name of the panel is Black Mothers Navigation of Historically White Private Pre-K through 6 Schools in the Northeast, Racial Advocacy Work, Performative Injustice, and Disrepair.
Also, due to privacy concerns, we will not be recording this panel, and the live stream will be stopping just for this one. Do you have your own stuff? You have to. You need to. Okay, gotcha. All right, give us a little bit of time. So you don't want it to be live streamed either? I mean, recorded to
Not recorded, but just so other people online can see. You don't want that live stream? Not live stream, but like, so the Zoom people can also see. Oh, the Zoom people can see. Okay. That's fine. I think just not recording. Yeah, not recording. Okay, recording off. Well, not stop, but just pause.